Hello true believers, and welcome to another fantastic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. If you enjoy videos like this one and you want to see more, please consider showing your support by liking and subscribing. You can also contribute directly via Patreon and vote in monthly polls for only $1 a month. This week's tale begins with a diminutive laboratory technician named Owen Reece. Some reports indicate that he was born in Brooklyn, but he apparently grew up in a small town called Dinosaur in Colorado. Ever since he was a child, he was frail and timid, always clinging to his larger mother. Even so, as Owen grew to adulthood, he was watched by powerful cosmic entities who saw a terrible potential within him. After his mother's death, he was left despondent, which was compounded by the fact that he felt completely unrecognized and unappreciated while working at the Acme Atomic Corporation's nuclear research facility. Depression led to carelessness, and one day while working with an experimental particle generator, an accident occurred, an event which rippled across the entire multiverse, shaking the foundations of creation. A pinhole was opened in the fabric of the universe itself, a rift in reality leading to an extra-dimensional realm filled with sentient energy by beings from beyond the current cosmos. Now, this isn't the only time one of these dimensions has been accessed, but normally doing so requires precise calculations and decades of preparation. Under normal circumstances, energy can be siphoned from beyond into a cosmic containment unit, which in Reality 616, the Marvel Universe, takes the shape of a perfect cube. But in Owen's case, no such vessel was present, and so the vast cosmic power was infused into his very body. It should be noted that the so-called accident which caused this was actually engineered by the very beings who'd filled the pocket dimensions with energy in the first place. These beings are older than the multiverse itself and several which preceded it. They have been called by many names like the Omega Council and the Ivory Kings, but they are most commonly referred to as Beyonders. Furthermore, the dimension that this event accessed was actually a womb space containing a child unit, a Beyonder who was still forming. Of course, Owen Reece was unaware of any of this at the time, simply believing that it was a fluke of science with the nuclear machine itself that had granted him power. Specifically the power to psionically manipulate matter and energy at the subatomic level, allowing him to move and reshape objects as he saw fit, or even transmute one substance into a completely different one. Initially, he was limited by his own mental state, unsure of his full potential, but he recognized the ability to manipulate molecules, and thus named himself the Molecule Man. One way he limited himself was through his reliance on a regular steel rod, which he used as a wand to focus his power. He evidently willed this wand into existence out of a reverence for stage magicians. More importantly, he subconsciously imposed mental blocks on himself, preventing him from affecting living tissue with his powers, and attempts to do so caused him great pain. This would likely be why he retained the facial scarring caused by the accident which gave him his powers. It was this limitation that was discovered by Reed Richards, the leader of the Fantastic Four. You see, the Molecule Man's creation was witnessed by an alien watcher named Uatu. Although the Watchers were sworn to never interfere with the affairs of mortals, the dangers posed by the Molecule Man was too great for Uatu to ignore, and so he warned his human allies, the Fantastic Four. This led to a confrontation between the FF and the Molecule Man when he publicly flaunted his powers in New York City. With help from the blind sculptress Alicia Masters, the heroes disguised themselves as statues and tricked Molecule Man into attempting to use his powers on them. With his own mental blocks preventing him from doing so, the feedback caused him to drop his molecular wand and temporarily lose his powers. Seizing upon this opportunity, the Watcher captured Owen Reece and attempted to reinforce his limiting mental blocks. Uatu imprisoned him on an other-dimensional planetoid where time moved faster than it did on Earth, likely hoping he would live out his natural lifespan before menacing the universe again. But at some point, a lonely molecule man, believing himself trapped, used his powers to create a humanoid construct as a companion, endowing it with a portion of his own consciousness and treating it as a son. After the molecule man seemingly died from some unidentified illness, his supposed son bombarded himself with ionic energy in an attempt to duplicate his father's powers. He believed himself successful, emerging with similar facial scarring, but it's incredibly unlikely that he actually accessed one of the Beyonder's pocket dimensions. While he may have been strengthened by the ionic bombardment, he actually inherited his father's power after claiming the molecular wand for himself. Now, Owen Reece did drop his wand before being captured by Uatu, but it would have been an easy task for him to either summon it into exile with him, or simply fashion a new one and leave the old one powerless. In either case, it seems that when Owen supposedly died, he actually transferred both his mind and his power into his son's wand. Because his son was an artificial construct, he was less affected by the limitations of the human mind and used the wand to escape back to Earth. He emerged in the Florida Everglades since the swamp there contained a nexus point leading to all realities. He soon encountered the Man-Thing who stood guard over the nexus, but discovered that his body was bound to the time scale of the dimension from which he came. He aged rapidly on Earth, but could reverse the process with the molecular wand. And while he clashed with Thing and Man-Thing in his quest for revenge on the Fantastic Four, he was separated from the wand and without it lost his powers and crumbled to dust. Since the wand itself appeared to be harmless without a molecule man to wield it, the Thing thought nothing of leaving it behind. From there, it soon fell into the possession of a girl named Cynthia McClellan while she was playing with her friends in the swamp. Owen's consciousness awakened from within the wand, and Cynthia was transformed into a sort of composite molecule person, combining traits from both her and Owen. They returned to Cynthia's home, reshaping it into a palace and turning her mother into a doll. But the young girl's mind continued to struggle trying to reassert control over their combined form. They soon clashed with Iron Man, but while they were distracted with him, the Man-Thing was able to force them to drop the molecular wand. The wand was briefly grabbed by a snake who was then transformed into a reptilian molecule man, and finally by Iron Man himself, who was able to resist the transformation long enough for Man-Thing to seize the wand and disappear with it into the swamp. While the shambling creature did not have a mind that the molecule man was capable of possessing, he was seen by another superpowered villain, Ulysses Claw. Curious, Claw followed the Man-Thing and recovered the wand after it was dropped into the swamp. Since his body was composed of solidified sound, Claw was also unable to be possessed by the Molecule Man. However, he was able to communicate with the spirit of Owen Reece, still trapped within the wand. Returning to New York City, Claw used his powers to place a boxer named Aaron Stankey into a hypnotic trance before handing him the wand. Thus, the Molecule Man was reborn and joined forces with Claw in an attempt to take revenge on the Fantastic Four. The heroes successfully caused him to drop his wand once again, but Mr. Fantastic became the Molecule Man's next host when he attempted to pick it up. But it was dropped again when he tried to affect the unstable molecules in the Fantastic Four's costumes. The molecular wand itself fell into a smokestack and was presumed destroyed. It later resurfaced again after being found by a homeless man who was briefly possessed. But after that, Owen Reece finally emerged from the wand itself, constructing a new body and fully transferring his mind and power into it. This event was witnessed by the Silver Surfer, who sensed the power within the wand shortly beforehand. After learning about the Surfer's former master, the World Eater Galactus, Molecule Man decided on a whim that he would consume the planet himself. This then put him into conflict with Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers. During the battle, Captain America succeeded in seizing the molecular wand, but with his true body restored, the wand itself no longer had any power on its own. The Molecule Man flaunted his abilities and was even able to easily disintegrate Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer, Iron Man's armor, and the Silver Surfer's board. However, it seems that his ability to create was still limited by his own knowledge and understanding. He even held the feline Avenger Tigra captive, wanting to make her his pet. Despite all of this, while the other heroes debated on if they should find a way to kill Molecule Man, it was Tigra who convinced him to abandon his destructive path and start seeking professional help. Before surrendering to police custody, Owen restored the hero's items, except for Iron Man's armor, which was too complicated for him to replicate. Again, it seems that his only limitations were in his mind, since he was able to restore Thor's hammer from nothingness with all of its powers and enchantments intact. The most glaring example of this is how, despite other iterations like the Son of the Molecule Man or the Composite Molecule Person displaying the ability to transform living beings, Owen still believed himself unable to affect organic material, which obviously prevented him from doing so. The wackiness and body hopping, his defeats, and even his apparent death were all caused by a lack of understanding of his full potential and his wavering mental state. Remember, this is a man who'd been mocked for being weak and timid his entire life, who felt lost, miserable, and unappreciated when he suddenly became quite possibly the most powerful man on the planet. But let's also remember that the event which caused this punched a pinhole in reality, leading to a pocket dimension where a child unit Beyonder was developing. From there, the young Beyonder observed the Earth and, having known nothing outside the emptiness of its own womb space, was fascinated by the human concept of desire. And so while Owen Reece was attending therapy and trying to reform, the Beyonder devised a test. The alien entity captured a handful of heroes and villains and decided to pit them against one another, and Owen Reece was among those taken and placed onto the supposedly evil side. Although the delineation between sides was based more on whether the Beyonder observed what he deemed to be selfish or altruistic behavior. In either case, things got off to a bad start when the villains were immediately attacked by one of their own, the rogue robot Ultron. Dr. Doom quickly deduced that the Molecule Man could easily deal with the threat, but Owen insisted that he'd given up using his powers and didn't want to hurt anyone. But Doom convinced him to at least push the robot, so he struck Galactus's leg. While the squabble was beneath his notice up to that point, once Ultron caught his attention, the World Eater simply drained the android of energy and left him deactivated. After that little scuffle, the Beyonder explained that whichever team defeated the other would have all of their desires granted. He also forged a patchwork planet to serve as a battle world made from fragments taken from other planets. Initially, Doom had no interest in being a pawn in someone else's game and sought an alliance with Galactus, but when he went ignored, he returned to the other villains and worked on befriending the most unassuming and yet the most powerful among them, the Molecule Man. Doom also sought to bolster his forces, which led him to find two women, Marcia Rosenberg and Skeeter McFerrin. It turns out one of the smaller planetary fragments that made up Battleworld actually came from Earth, a suburb of Denver, Colorado. The two women agreed to be part of an experiment, and Doom used alien technology to endow them with superhuman powers. While Skeeter McFerrin was transformed into Titania, Marcia Rosenberg became the fiery Volcana. And after joining with the rest of the group, Marcia was drawn to the Molecule Man, who she'd heard of before. She was surprised that someone with so much power was so reserved and sensitive. The two started bonding, with Owen being open about how his therapy was going and how even though he could control so much about the world around him, he'd learned that he should allow things to run their natural course. However, they were both swayed by Doom's charisma and force of will, and decided to follow him while still caught up in the Beyonders' secret war. Owen's power continued to impress, and at one point he dropped an entire mountain range on the heroes. Marcia was more and more drawn to him, while Owen simultaneously found himself increasingly infatuated with the larger, taller woman. He opened up to her about his life leading up to his accident and how he'd been mocked for his stature and nerdiness, and Marcia started to grow protective of him. Not that she needed to be. When the villain Piledriver tried to bully the couple, even making fun of Marcia's weight, Owen simply turned his costume to metal so he couldn't move. The Absorbing Man and the other members of the Wrecking Crew, meanwhile, knew better than to mess with them. Thanks to Marcia, the Molecule Man began to grow more confident. But he was still limited in ways, and during one battle he was injured by Wolverine. Marcia stayed by his side during his recovery, even while their base was being attacked by the heroes. Eventually, this war came to a head when Dr. Doom succeeded in stealing the power of the Beyonder. Thinking Doom had betrayed them, Molecule Man attacked with another impressive display. But rather than fight, Doom used his new abilities to help Owen better understand his own. Granted insight into the building blocks of the universe, Owen realized that it wasn't just inorganic molecules that he could bend to his will. In truth, any form of matter or energy was his to command, with his only limits being those that he put on himself. While Doom clashed with the heroes in the final battles of the First Secret War, Owen and the other villains retreated to Marcia's suburban home. Suffice it to say that Doom was ultimately thwarted and the Beyonder reclaimed his power. Meanwhile, the Molecule Man returned the Denver suburb to its proper place on Earth. After things finally settled again, Owen moved in with Marcia and the two started a proper relationship. He found work at an atomic power plant, and for a brief time they had a relatively normal life together. But then something happened that threatened everything they knew. The Beyonder came to Earth. With seemingly unlimited power and many existential questions, the Beyonder found Owen, initially manifesting in a physical form mimicking mismatched attributes of the superhumans he'd observed. Owen tried to help him understand his own omnipotence, but when the Beyonder expressed his desire for experiences, Marcia suggested that he start with LA. Taking different forms before settling on a human appearance, the Beyonder's attempts to understand the world often resulted in disastrous consequences. Owen was determined not to get involved in the conflict, and even when the Beyonder asserted control over every molecule on Earth, Owen simply ensured that Marcia was unaffected and went on about his day. But the Beyonder would sometimes return to speak with Owen again and ask more questions. And eventually Owen felt another invisible presence in his apartment, that of Uatu the Watcher, who had also come to speak with him. His ancient race had convened and decided that the Beyonder was a threat to all of existence that must be addressed. And so Uatu asked the Molecule Man to stop the Beyonder before irreparable damage was done to reality. Owen still refused, but he was forced to step in after the Beyonder killed Death itself. He convinced the Beyonder to restore Death, but following this he could tell that the other cosmic forces of the multiverse were conspiring to deal with the threat themselves. And Owen was unsure if he should help them or warn the Beyonder, having begun to see him as a friend. But even their attempts ultimately failed, and the Beyonder came to Owen once again. He vented his frustration, causing considerable damage across the multiverse, but the Molecule Man was able to quickly and easily reverse this destruction with his own power. However, the Beyonder started wishing that he was alone like he was before he discovered the existence of dimensions outside his own. He started to consider wiping away all of reality, and so Owen decided to talk to him about his past. When they looked back in time to discover the Beyonder's origins, they learned that the event that opened a pinhole in his dimension was the same one that gave the Molecule Man his powers. Owen tried to convince him that he may be able to find fulfillment if he became truly human, and while he considered doing so, he also professed his intention to erase everything except himself. While the Beyonder continued to clash with the heroes of Earth, Owen suggested that he and Marcia simply escaped the Beyonder's original dimension, but she convinced him that they couldn't run forever. And so when the Beyonder visited them again, the Molecule Man attacked. The Beyonder survived the initial assault and prepared to counterattack, but before he did, Marcia intervened. Feigning apathy for Molecule Man's fate, she begged for her own life and escaped. As she hoped would happen, Owen collapsed, and the Beyonder left without hurting him. While this plan was questionable and risky, it ultimately worked, and when she later returned, Owen was okay. After going through a period of introspection, he realized that he needed to find his strength and confidence without relying on someone else. When Marcia returned, Owen was ready to love her, not because he thought he needed her, but because he wanted to be with her. He then joined the other heroes in the final battle of the Second Secret War as the only human capable of standing up to their all-powerful enemy. Even so, the Beyonder was the mightiest being the Earth had ever encountered to that point, and forced back his attackers. The resulting devastation scarred the face of the planet, with the heroes only surviving because of the Molecule Man's protection. After regrouping and returning to where their foe was, the heroes found that the Beyonder was using a machine to grow a new body for himself, and he was vulnerable because of this. While the others debated the morality of the situation, Owen decided that the Beyonder needed to die and destroyed the machine. While the developing infant body indeed passed away, the release of energy threatened to cause an explosion capable of erasing all of existence. Thankfully, the Molecule Man saved reality by redirecting that energy back into the pocket dimension that the Beyonder came from, triggering the birth of a new parallel universe. While the war was over, the Earth was on the brink of destruction due to the damage it had sustained. Owen was able to use his abilities to hold the planet together, but the battle with the Beyonder had left him weakened. Ultimately, the Avengers convinced him to join his power with the Silver Surfer to undo the damage and save the Earth. In the process, Owen seemed to lose his powers, but this was simply a ruse to allow him and Marcia to live in peace. But this peace was later interrupted when Owen was suddenly attacked by Dr. Doom. Doom's motivations during this time were somewhat complicated due to the involvement of time travel, but largely centered around the fact that because of the Beyonder's manipulations, Doom was missing his memories of the First Secret War. In any event, Owen Reece survived the attack, having been subconsciously saved by his own powers. Followed by several members of the Fantastic Four, Dr. Doom then traveled to the newly created universe that formed from the Beyonder's erupting energies. Within that pocket reality, the Beyonder was still alive, as everything in that realm was an extension of himself. There, they were soon joined by two more beings with similar reality warping powers, Cubic and the Shaper of Worlds. Now, up top we mentioned how in the past, sentient energy from Beyonder dimensions has been siphoned off to form devices known as cosmic cubes. These cubes afford the wielder incredible power, seemingly only limited by the mind of the user. But because they are powered by sentient energy, a cosmic cube will eventually become self-aware and take on a physical form of its own. That's where Cubic and the Shaper of Worlds came from, both of whom are evolved cosmic cubes. Now, this gathering of cosmic entities was soon joined by the Molecule Man as well, who wanted to destroy the Beyonder before Doom could attempt to claim his power once again. But the Shaper of Worlds believed that the Beyonder and the Molecule Man were two incomplete halves of a cosmic cube. Wanting to finally put an end to all of these secret wars, Owen bid farewell to his beloved Marcia, and joined with the Beyonder, with Cubic and the Shaper forging the two into a single cosmic cube. While Doom's plan to obtain ultimate power failed, he did touch the newly formed cube long enough to use it to restore his full memories before he was cast back to Earth. But this was still not the end of the Molecule Man, for as he joined with the Beyonder, he imparted a portion of his power into Marcia Rosenberg. Not knowing this, she tried to use her abilities as Volcana for good, developing a new volcanic stone form. Meanwhile, the newly formed cube soon took physical form for itself and became known as Cosmos. When that happened, Owen's mortal form was ejected from the cube and sent back to Earth. Initially, he didn't want to intrude on the new life that Marcia had made for herself, but after a few weeks he returned to her. But Owen was different, more secretive and less confident without his powers. Soon after reuniting, the two were attacked by Ulysses Klaw on behalf of Advanced Idea Mechanics, the organization that had made the cosmic cube that evolved into Cubic. In the ensuing battle, Marcia wished that Owen still had his powers, causing the energy he'd passed to her to return to him. While he wasn't as powerful as he once was, he was able to drive off Klaw. However, Owen seemed to care more about his powers than anything else, and Marcia asked him to leave before her visiting family arrived. Owen complied with her wishes, insisting that he still loved her and would find a way to prove it. Retreating to the Colorado Rockies, he created a palace for himself and a shrine to Marcia. He was briefly involved in a conflict against a rogue watcher who captured Alicia Masters. Her father, the Puppet Master, compelled Owen to attack the rogue watcher, and the Fantastic Four ultimately rescued Alicia. Interestingly, during this encounter, Owen was back to being unable to affect organic material. But later, after returning to New York, his loneliness started to overwhelm him. He wished that he could be someone else, and this desire caused him to transform himself into the earlier, more vengeful version of the Molecule Man. Blaming the Beyonder for his misery, he actually reached into deep space with his power, ripping the Beyonder out of Cosmos so he could destroy him once and for all. However, Cubic soon arrived with the dying Cosmos and beseeched Molecule Man for help. Coming to his senses, Owen returned to his original form and restored Cosmos, merging her with the Beyonder once again. He later ran into Marcia at the wedding of Titania and the Absorbing Man, but even though she still had feelings for him, Owen felt spurned by the way things had ended. Unsure of what to do, he kidnapped the superhuman psychiatrist Dr. Leonard Samson, seeking help. This put him into conflict with Samson's ally, the She-Hulk, who reminded him of Marcia. Ultimately, he decided that the key to his happiness was to win Marcia back. As a first step towards this goal, he carved her face into the side of Mount Rushmore. Reports of what happened next are sparse, but it seems that at some point the Molecule Man relapsed into villainy. He was imprisoned at the supervillain holding facility, the Raft, under unrevealed circumstances. He later encountered a team of Dark Avengers led by Norman Osborn after taking over his hometown of Dinosaur, Colorado. During that conflict, Owen was seemingly killed by another absurdly powerful superhuman, the Sentry. But the Molecule Man reformed again and allied himself with Dr. Doom. Despite their tumultuous history, Doom had discovered a plot to destroy the entire multiverse. This scheme was a grand experiment being conducted by none other than the Beyonders. Not the young one the Molecule Man had encountered in the past, but his forebears, the Ivory Kings. To explain where they come from, let us look back to the beginning, the start of all creation, the first cosmos. In the beginning, there was one universe, the first firmament, and that was all that existed. A sentient being in and of itself, the first firmament created worshippers, massive monochrome beings of great power. Among these worshippers, a rebel faction arose, each one a vibrant color. They were intrigued by concepts like change and evolution and sought to see them play out. They became known as the Celestials, and those who fought against them in favor of stagnation were called the Aspirants. A celestial war erupted, one which resulted in the splintering of the universe, but in its place something new arose. The second iteration of the cosmos became the first multiverse, brimming with possibilities. It was there in the second cosmos that the Celestials created servants of their own, capable of exploring and maintaining the new multiverse, Omega beings with infinite potential. But the second cosmos was short-lived on a cosmic scale, lasting only a few thousand years. Of course, reality was born anew with the third cosmos. And so the multiverse continued to operate on a cycle of death and rebirth, resulting in the 4th, 5th, and 6th multiverses, until we finally reached the 7th cosmos, the multiverse containing Reality 616, the Marvel Universe as we know it. Meanwhile, the Omega beings continued to exist beyond the multiverse in the remnants of the second cosmos. Over the countless eons, they took different forms and different names, including the Omega Council, the Ivory Kings, and the Beyonders. And during the time of the 7th cosmos, they embarked on a grand experiment to see what would happen if they destroyed all life in the multiverse simultaneously. And the weapon they would use to accomplish this was none other than Owen Reece, the Molecule Man. But not just any Molecule Man, every Molecule Man. One of the things that made Owen Reece uniquely qualified for this was that the Beyonders were able to engineer the accident that gave him his powers in such a way that it occurred in every parallel reality within the multiverse. The Molecule Man was a bomb capable of destroying his universe, and when they all went off at the same time, everything would die. Dr. Doom discovered this and joined forces with the Owen Reece of his own dimension to stop it at all costs. The two traveled to different universes, killing parallel Molecule Men to set them off early in an attempt to mitigate the damage. Doom also built a religion around himself, recruiting assassins known as Black Swans to help in this quest. However, the early destruction of these universes had grave consequences, causing a contraction in the time scale of the multiverse's natural lifetime. This resulted in an event known as an incursion, in which two universes were pushed together. The point of impact was always the Earth, and so in each incursion, two Earths would smash together. This caused an explosion that wiped out both universes involved, which caused further contraction and hence more incursions. And so Doom changed tactics, and instead of slaughtering Molecule Men, he started collecting them. However, he'd lost control of the religion he'd started, and the Black Swans continued to hasten the end of everything. As this end approached, Doom was found by Dr. Strange, who stood by him in his bid to save existence itself. Armed with their ultimate weapon, Dr. Doom, Dr. Strange, and the Molecule Man went to the edge of reality to challenge the Ivory Kings. They fired a bomb made of countless Molecule Men into the realm of the Beyonders. While the resulting explosion shattered their enemy, it also echoed across the multiverse, destroying many of the remaining realities. In one moment, the number of universes left dropped from several 100,000 to less than a dozen. Soon, there were only two left, the Marvel Universe we know, and one referred to as the Ultimate Universe. But with the Beyonders destroyed, Molecule Man helped Doom absorb their power so they could save the remnants of reality. After the final incursion, using the shattered pieces of destroyed Earths, Doom forged a new patchwork planet, a new battle world, that he ruled as God Emperor. None of this world's inhabitants could remember their previous existence except for Dr. Doom, Dr. Strange, and of course the Molecule Man, who was kept in a secret chamber beneath Doom's castle and served as a repository for his unlimited power. However, others from the last two universes survived and landed on Battleworld free of Doom's influence. one of whom was Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. It didn't take long for Doom to learn that his rival was still alive, kicking off one more secret war. Richards dispatched the two surviving Spider-Men, Peter Parker from his own reality, and Miles Morales from the Ultimate Universe, to find the source of Doom's power. This, of course, led them to the Molecule Man, who asked them if they'd brought him any food. Miles happened to be carrying a hamburger in his pocket, and despite it being several weeks old, Owen happily scarfed it down. After confirming that the Molecule Man was the power source they were looking for, the Spider-Men left and Owen told Miles that he owed him one. Meanwhile, discord and dissent spread across Battleworld, and more people rose up against Doom's rule. Things eventually came to a head when Mr. Fantastic visited the Molecule Man and was found there by Doom. But because neither of them had brought Owen anything to eat, he cut Doom off from his power so they could be equals in combat. The two men struggled, and when Doom's armor allowed him to gain the upper hand, he started ranting about how Richards believed that he could have done a better job with the power of the Beyonders. Reed confirmed that yes, he did believe that he could, and insisted that Doom knew that it was true as well. When Doom begrudgingly admitted as much, the Molecule Man decided to endow Mr. Fantastic with omnipotence instead of Dr. Doom. In a flash of light, Battleworld was destroyed and the last secret war came to an end. But this time, Reed Richards worked together with Owen Reece to begin rebuilding the multiverse. They were aided by Richards' son Franklin, who had some experience with rebuilding universes thanks to his own reality-shaping power, but perhaps that's a story for another day. The first reality they restored was their own, Earth 616, which became the prime universe in this new multiverse. Indeed, the seventh cosmos had been completely destroyed, but the eighth, from its inception, was a continuation of it, picking up just about where it had left off. Owen also repaid his debt to Miles Morales, transplanting the young Spider-Man's family and history from the dour Ultimate Universe to the more heroic Marvel Universe, resurrecting Miles' mother in the process. For every universe they created or restored, a piece of the Molecule Man was split off, going with it to serve as an anchor in the new cosmos. This was not painful or unpleasant for him, and actually seemed to ease his burden, making him feel more complete with every restored reality. While the Beyonders had intended for the Molecule Man to cause the end of all life in the multiverse, in the end, Owen Reece was instrumental in the survival and restoration of reality itself. And that is the story of Owen Reece, quite possibly the most powerful man in the Marvel Universe. But that's all I've got time for this week. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share the video, and subscribe for more marvelous content. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page, where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special things here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!